Karre auf Surfbrett, Hawaii 0, Hawaii 0. Die Wellen rauschen, wir sehen den Sturm, Hawaii 0, Hawaii 0.
Hello, my dear friends. Operator Starsky here, together with Caolan. Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you so much. My friends, today we have a British journalist who I think you can tell you a bit about yourself, actually.
Yeah, well, for the last 4 years, I've ran something called Byline TV. It's the video department of Byline Times, and I started doing on-the-ground reporting all across the UK. A lot of the beginning of it was to do with Brexit, was to do with people that voted for Brexit and regretted it. I did lots of reports on then Russian disinformation with John Sweeney. He lived quite close to the Byline offices and started working really closely. So I directed a film with him about Alexander Lebedev, his father, and dodgy links with Boris Johnson. And that kind of sort of snowballed into making more films about Russian disinformation and opened a whole sort of can of worms. So for the last 4 years, I've been sort of investigating and reporting on the UK side of disinformation, and now, I guess, Russian disinformation. Before that, I was actually working with right-wing media, a bit similar to Nick, who we're going to talk about later. For about a year, I worked for Rebel Media as a presenter and used to make stuff about free speech and this sort of stuff before realizing that was all nonsense. And I think that made it even more of a drive for me to to expose the kind of networks that we're talking about now. So it's been a super interesting journey. But yeah, and now I live in Ukraine. I moved here about a month ago, having made a documentary here last year, and I'm going to be here for the long term.
Sounds really cool. What was the story with this Nick? Can you remind us, please? Because it's really, really exciting.
So about a month ago, a kid named Nick Shirley, who is a sort of MAGA, Make America Great Again, Trump type provocateur. He's got a YouTube channel with 250K. He goes to sort of towns across the US and makes, I guess, like provocative content, lots of streeters talking about, you know, would you rather vote for Trump or Harris, but sort of slants it towards Trump. And I guess he decided to try it out in a war zone, which I haven't really seen done before by a person like that. And he thought it would work. So Nick arrived here about a month ago in Kyiv. He was here for 3 days. He filmed through the fixers that I spoke to, you know, a lot of content. He saw Bucha, he saw lots of different areas north of Kyiv. He saw the harsh reality of the war. Nick leaves Ukraine, sits on this for a couple of weeks, and then decides to release a initial report, basically pretending that there's no war happening, basically playing down the whole situation in this country, and saying this is where your tax dollars are going, and films in the wealthy area of Kyiv, fast cars that were there before the war, buildings that were there before the war, and a Ferris wheel that was there before the war, as if that's where your money is going if you live in the US. Knew exactly what he was doing, caused a huge amount of outrage on Twitter, tried to backtrack. However, the damage was already done. He has now released a documentary that's more sympathetic to Ukraine, but again, I think this is a last-minute scramble, but has rightfully outraged a lot of people in this country. So I decided to investigate this. I know the fixer that actually arranged his trip. So initially did an interview with him, Corey, and the woman, Darina, who drove him all around while he was here. And both of them were rightfully shocked by the report that he put out, because it was the total opposite of what he witnessed when he was here. So that snowballed into then me reaching out to him and basically asking him for an interview, because I wanted him to explain himself as to why he did this. And that interview is now sort of infamous for him. I think it was probably not the best idea for him to do that, but as if filming fast cars in Kyiv has anything to do with American taxpayers' dollars. And the reason that I interviewed him and focused on this is because the reach of the content that he put out was massive. 2.2 million views on TikTok. Young people who don't know what's going on in Ukraine, who now think it's a money laundering scheme. So damaging. Weeks before the US election, which is make or break in a lot of ways for the munitions that are going to arrive here. So I wanted to confront him about it, and that's kind of how all this started. But I'm still like outraged by the whole thing, really, and I think a lot of people rightfully are.
God. Well, first of all, thank you so much for what you did, because it's a proper thing to expose such people. And you know, I checked his channel. He was like, the dude comes to Ukraine to ask Ukrainian people whom do they support, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. What the fuck? Like, seriously, what? Like, I don't know what to comment here, but you know, I checked his video where he asks local people about this, and he also asked them about how do you think American taxes are spent, and there's a man who says, well, I think that like, I don't know where those taxes go to, but I think they're not spent the proper way, you know, which is again extremely cool thing to ask somebody on the street how like American taxes are spent. One thing I'm really happy they didn't say that, you know, they were like literally catching those money being parachuted over Ukraine, because that's apparently what Nick Shirley thinks. But those cars that were like parked on the streets, and by the way, a lot of them were from different oblasts of Ukraine, judging from the registration plates, because people apparently came from like Odessa, from Kharkiv to Kyiv, which is a bit more safe, has better air defense. This is freaking ridiculous. Oh my god. You know, I think that he arrived, and first thing he did, because generally this specific content, like the taxes and whatever, and support for Harris or Donald Trump, that could be uploaded later, because generally when you come to Ukraine, you come to present to your audience what really happens here. What really happens on the front line. Has he visited the front line, by the way?
Yeah, well, he went to Bucha, which is apparently, you know, in East Ukraine. This is, I think it might be near Kursk or near the Russian border. It might even be in Kursk. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been that far. I'm not brave enough yet to go there. But I mean, this is what was so ridiculous. So Nick basically was offered to go to Kharkiv and to go to frontline cities, and you don't need accreditation to go there. He declined because he was terrified that he might be bombed, which is weird because he's making it seem like there's no war. So which is it? Is there no war, or are you scared of being bombed? That's very confusing. So he declines those trips. Then when he's confronted by Ukrainians saying, why didn't you go to frontline cities if you were going to play down the war and actually show the reality, and said, oh, I couldn't get accreditation. So, you know, this is just lies upon deceit. And it just continues and continues and continues. And if you look at all of the comments, they're all contradictory. And again, this wouldn't matter because this kid, I think this kid is pretty dumb. This wouldn't matter if it was a random American that just arrived here to just be misled. But the fact that he has a huge reach and he's still putting all this out is why it's actually got a super serious undertone. But I mean, God, like, he was taken to Bucha where he was shown trenches. He was taken to the children's hospital that was bombed days before he arrived and shown the inside of that hospital, and still made a decision for his first report to be about money laundering and corruption, to be about luxury cars in Kyiv. He went home back to America and made a moral decision that was bankrupt, to sit on all the footage he had, look at all the absolute horrors that are happening in this country, and he knows that those things are horrendous, and think, I can make more money out of this. That's what happened there. So yeah, he was taken to Bucha, he was taken to Irpin, his fixers were amazing. They took him to exactly the right places, and they showed him the reality of the war. He knew the reality of the war and decided to profit from it instead. So, you know, this is just the most egregious example I've seen of any kind of propaganda, because it was done from within Ukraine. You know, the typical Kremlin propaganda that we see, you know, Margarita Simonyan, the Tenet media scandal, these are, you know, morally bankrupt Americans and Canadians taking filthy, dirty money and pontificating garbage on their television shows in America. But to actually have someone come here and say what he said is another level. I actually haven't seen anything like that since the start of the war. Obviously, we saw the bullshit that Gonzalo Lira was putting out, and that was to be expected because this was, you know, basically a Russian asset anyway. But to have an American do it and do it for YouTube audience in the way that he did was unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. So, I mean, I think this is going to continue. Ian Miles Chong, who lives in Malaysia, but apparently is involved in Ukrainian politics, God knows how, has been sharing the video again today, getting it hundreds of thousands of views, doing it more damage. And it's going to continue to circulate, especially around the election. And things like this need to be shut down immediately. Obviously, people like Nick shouldn't be allowed back into Ukraine, or maybe they should be allowed back into Ukraine and then and then kept here for a little while. But it's just absolutely insane. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, and I don't know what he's thinking right now. I think he regrets putting out the stuff that he did originally. This will haunt him for a long time. The interview I did with him has 15 times more views than the documentary he put out, which is good because the interview with him is the truth. The documentary is whatever. And and I guess we'll see what happens next. But this is to be expected. It's before an election. There is evidence that the Kremlin is pumping tens of millions of dollars into right-wingers, into YouTubers in North America. I don't know if he's connected to that directly or not, but we're going to see so much of this. We saw Tim Pool only a couple of months ago saying that Ukraine is the enemy of America, while he's taking $400,000 a month from the Kremlin. We now, at the same time, see an American YouTuber come here and say that there's basically no war going on, and it's before the election. I think it's all tied in, but it's just deeply depressing because I don't know why it was me that reached out to him to take him down for an interview and not CNN or BBC or the mainstream media. They should be on this immediately. This is propaganda being made in wartime in the capital city of this country, and I seem to be the only one that was making a video confronting him about it. So that's a failure of the media too. I don't know where they are right now. Are they taking money from the Russians as well? God knows. But it's honestly, it has been deeply depressing to witness. I know it's quite cathartic to watch my interview with him, but it's been extremely frustrating.
I agree on that. I think that, of course, this will haunt him for a while. And we discussed today that it's a similar story like the one that happened to Tim Pool that will haunt him as well for quite a while. But, whatever we consider like a total disgrace, apparently some people consider like, a good chance to earn cash, because what for us is a freaking shame and disgrace, to others is, Russians are paying money for spreading bullshit about Ukraine. It's a good opportunity, to earn for like a new iPhone or something like that.
Yeah, it's a tiny payoff for people like that. He probably thought he could make a few $1,000s. And again, at what cost? At what cost? You might be able to, I assume he probably lives with his parents or something, so he's not paying rent, but you could make a couple $1,000s to put this stuff out. Basically burn the bridges of all the lovely people that you met here, produce actual propaganda that could get people killed, because if you put out propaganda saying that there isn't a war here and people vote for Trump instead of Harris, and munitions aren't sent to this country because Trump is in the pocket of Putin, then people are going to die, something that I hope he understands. Then it's like completely off the charts. For what? For what? YouTube ad revenue, TikTok clout? This just shows, it was quite funny in that interview in some ways, because he was saying, Bucha, isn't that in East Ukraine? And it's like, a lot of people were thinking this is a typical American, tourist type behavior. But it has an edge to it that is just so cynical. So cynical. And after that interview, he messaged me and said, I guess I did make a mistake. My biggest mistake was that, this is literally what he messaged me. My biggest mistake was that I mixed up Bucha with East Ukraine. I guess I don't know Ukrainian geography that well. No, your biggest mistake was producing lies and propaganda from a country at war. He went and saw the flags of the fallen soldiers in Kyiv and spoke to a mother who had lost her son, and went home and made that video saying that there basically wasn't a war. I don't know what kind of separation you can have to do that. Again, when I made content when I was 19, 20, younger than him, for Rebel, it was like, has free speech been eroded? Has, feminism gone too far? It was all these kind of silly MAGA talking points. But this is another level to MAGA grifting that I've never seen in my life. And I hope we don't see more of it, because, again, the reach and the damage that this stuff produces is huge. There aren't enough journalists in Ukraine as well actually producing content about what's going on in the ground. That's because of the US election. That's because of what's going on in Gaza. So there's an information void right now in this country. What's happening in Kharkiv right now, what's happening in Zaporizhia right now with buildings being destroyed, hasn't received the coverage it really needs. But Nick's video is blowing up on X right now. And the Kremlin love this. Putin loves this. This is a dream for them. And it's just so depressing. I really don't know what to think about it, because it's still happening now. It's still active.
Yeah, I think the reason he came to Kiev and not for like Kharkiv, which is again a great place to make footage about the situation on the ground, because in Kharkiv you can feel it, and like of course if you're lucky to survive. But generally he came to Kiev because Kiev has the best air defense, and what to show there, I don't really know. If he really wanted to have footage from places like Kramatorsk, from places like Slovyansk, I don't know, Kharkiv, he could reach out to military, to, I don't know. If he went to Ukraine like 2023, I would bring him to places like Chasiv Yar myself, probably. But he
But he
went,
wouldn't go.
yeah, he
He
wouldn't
wouldn't go
go.
because he was offered to go to those places. He wouldn't need to reach out to anyone because Corey said, "Hey, you want to really see what's going on in Ukraine on the full extent? We'll take you to Kharkiv. It's a few hours on the train." No, I don't want to go to Kharkiv. I'm too scared, he was told. Scared of what? There's no war. There's nothing going on apparently. Apparently there's just luxury cars and Ferris wheels. Apparently that's all Ukraine is, and wasted taxpayers' dollars. And in his report talking about all these new high rises that are going up right now, you know, he's filming all these new buildings being built. God forbid a country at war that's having all of their buildings destroyed would rehouse the people in those countries. So he knew the danger. He was offered those trips. He could have gone to places like Chasiv Yar. I went to places like Chasiv Yar without accreditation, but he decided not to, despite knowing the danger, because he came here with an agenda. He came here thinking, working backwards. I'm going to start with a video saying there's nothing happening here in this propaganda, and I'm going to work backwards, which means I don't want to waste my time going to, actual, places on the front line. Why should I bother even taking my lens cap off going there? I'm not going to release that footage. I'm going to go film the nice areas and leave. Like he had already made the video before he got on that bus from Poland.
I believe so. Can you tell us a bit about your experience in Ukraine? What do you do?
Yeah, so like last year, I guess early last year, February, I got a message from John Sweeney. John Sweeney was based here since the full-scale invasion. He does a war diary documenting everything that goes on every day. And I've obviously made films with him in the past. I've been very, very close with him. And he said, let's make a short film about the number of people that have been killed on the anniversary of the war, the 1 year anniversary, 22nd of February. And I said, okay, so I found a stadium in the north of Kyiv. I think it was in Irpin, and it was bombed, and there was lots of seats destroyed. And I wanted to do a visualization of the death toll in this country, of the needless slaughter that's happened, the needless deaths. And so I wanted to basically go in that stadium, which we did, and film John sitting down on one of the seats and saying, the seat next to me that's destroyed, who should have been sitting here? Imagine this stadium times 100. This is how many people have been wiped off the face of the earth in Ukraine. And it was meant to be, a really emotional film visualizing the loss in this country and trying to imagine each and every face. Because that's the sort of content that I made in the UK. I did something similar when COVID happened. And when the war broke out, at the beginning of 2022, I went to the Polish border and filmed refugees pouring across the border, and I wanted to put a face to a lot of what was going on, but I was only supposed to be here for a few days, and I would go out with John in the evening in Kyiv and hear stories from soldiers coming back from the front, from volunteer workers, from NGO workers telling me the most horrific stuff that was happening to civilians, and I didn't know the extent of that when I first heard it. I was shocked. The way that they had mined the land here, the way that they had rigged cats and dogs and pets and turned them into mines to needlessly kill civilians, the way that they tortured people in Kherson simply for looking at soldiers in the wrong way. And I genuinely, when I got here, I thought this was a war between two militaries. I thought it was between the Russian army and the Ukrainian army. I didn't know it was between the Russians and everything alive here, everyone. And I decided to stay and make a full film about it. And I was like, I don't want to leave Ukraine until I've documented what I've heard, because I don't have political power, I don't have financial power, nothing like that, but I know how to make films and tell stories, and I really wanted to tell the story that was unfolding in front of me. So John said, well, we could go to Kramatorsk, we could go to Chasiv Yar, we could go east. And I'd never been to anywhere with any conflict, not even a riot. in the UK in my life. But I wanted to do it, so I did some training for a couple of days in Kyiv with a volunteer course, rented some stuff, and we drove east. We went to Kramatorsk, and it's the first time I'd ever heard munitions. It's the first time I'd ever heard things incoming and outgoing and landing, and couldn't sleep for days, and was completely inspired by the soldiers that were waking up every morning and fighting for days without any sleep, and asked them why they were doing this and asked them why they fought every day. And they looked at me like I was crazy for even asking, because it's our land, our country, our people. This is everything that we hold dear. I saw a car covered in bullet holes racing out of Bakhmut, pull into a petrol station, and the soldiers pulled out. And they had a lit cigarette, and they looked all the way for about 5 minutes, despite being shelled 5 minutes ago, for a bin just to put the cigarette out, because they didn't want to litter, because they love their country. They want to keep things here beautiful and clean. And I had never seen anything like it. So we stayed, and we found evidence of chemical weapons that were used against civilians in this country. There were images that locals showed me of white phosphorus being used above Konstantinivka, above Sloviansk at night. This was, they called it lustra. This is to illuminate battlefields at night, and they're using it over people's houses. It burns at thousands of degrees Celsius and melts everything in its path. It is against the Geneva Convention, and it is against the basics of humanity, and they're using it in civilian areas. And I said, well, this is where this is what we should document. And I didn't know why there weren't enough reports about it. So we followed this for a long time. We started investigating it. We drove down to Kherson, where we heard similar reports of it being used, and found houses that had been burned down on the river, and evidence and cartridges showing that it was the lustra that had done it. We had those lustra capsules analyzed in London, and submitted the findings to the ICC, and put it together into a documentary called Under Deadly Skies, about basically Russia's crimes against the people in this country. Apple TV took that film. It won a few awards. I guess it's the first film I directed that's had an impact like that. But I felt deeply proud of it, and I went back to London and went to these nice parties at the Groucho Club that were organized for journalists that had been to Ukraine, went to Paris, and went to Ireland for film festivals that had nominated Under Deadly Skies, where there were canapes, and it was all very nice. And I just felt like I couldn't go back to normal life again, and it all felt deeply wrong, knowing I had only been in this country for a few months and only seen a fraction of what was going on, a fraction, less than 1%. So it bothered me for a really long time, and I ended up basically only being able to think about Ukraine. Everyone that I'd met, their faces were burned into my mind. Ria, which is the restaurant in Kramatorsk that I went to every single night, that Paul Conroy and John Sweeney and I used to go after going to and from Chasiv Yar. We used to call it the shelter in the storm. It was the only restaurant that was open in the city, and everyone worked around the clock to try and create a feeling of normality just in the evenings, despite what was going on. And I remember seeing the news about the S-300 that went into it and obliterated it and killed everyone inside of it. And I just felt like I needed to come back here and even just see that again, and to carry on filming what I was filming. I just found it impossible to go back to British politics and just act like everything was normal again, and talk about Brexit and how we couldn't get potatoes in at 50p anymore. It was 70p after that. And, just going back to just politics, it just felt like nonsense. So I made a decision this year that I wanted to move here permanently and make daily reports about everything that is going on in the capacity I possibly can. And this week, I only started this 2 weeks ago for my YouTube channel. This week, it happened to be about disinformation. We had the Trump shooter, well, last week, the guy that tried to kill Trump, Ryan Ruth, who was blamed, who basically dragged Ukraine into all of this, and made it seem like it was Ukraine's fault. This is like 9 a.m. on Monday morning, and apparently everything is already Ukraine's fault, typical, and it was all amplified by the Kremlin. So I started making reports about how that was all disinformation, about how he came here, was rejected for being an absolute lunatic, and had nothing to do with Ukraine. And then we had the Nick Shirley incident just 48 hours after, and started focusing on that. So whatever is happening, I'm going to try and do reports countering it or confronting it. And because I used to make, I guess, looking back, propaganda for a year when I was younger for things like Rebel, I never mentioned Ukraine or anything like that, but I guess looking back, it was propaganda. I'm quite good at spotting it. I'm quite good at understanding how it works. Ezra Levant was my boss for a year, and he used to talk about how algorithms drove everything they did, about how donations drove everything they did. They had dodgy money, they had dodgy funding. So I understand how it works, and I can see those networks, So I guess it's putting that knowledge of what I did when I was younger into countering disinformation, but then also now I want to also go to frontline cities. I've got accreditation now to go to Kherson next week. I've got accreditation to go to other places I actually can't mention yet. It's basically going to be a mix of doing on the ground reporting and countering disinformation, and doing it on my own channel for the first time. Byline is amazing. I produce a show for them every week called Frontline Byline, but I can't go back to London and return to what I was doing before, not after seeing what I saw in the country. I think it would be impossible. I actually feel like I'm in love with Ukraine. There's an infectious spirit with people here, and I think it existed far before the war. I think it's always been here, of people that deeply care about their neighbors and their country, something that Britain lost a long time ago. I don't feel that in Britain. I don't feel that when I go to America anymore. These countries are broken compared to places like Ukraine, actually. So I don't know what the future is going to hold, but I know that I'm in the right place, and I feel like I'm doing the right thing.
I don't know, bro. I think that the UK, the experience of the British people, the wartime experience during the World War II was a big inspiration for Ukrainians, actually. Because currently Ukraine is going through the same situation, and we're experiencing absolutely the same. Again, we talked about it with Professor Tim Wilson the other day, about people just celebrating because this is how you keep your spirit on the proper level, your morale. If you Google London 1941, and you can see people dancing and celebrating despite the war, despite the danger, despite the bombs falling, it's a proper thing, because people have this delusion apparently that there's war in Ukraine. That is why Ukrainian civilians are forbidden to smile, forbidden to have a drink in the evening or something like that. That is or drive good car. That is something absolutely crazy. And I do really appreciate what you're doing for our country. I really hope that you're gonna like it here. By the way, where are you staying? I mean the city.
I was going to say, probably shouldn't say that. I'm in Odessa at the moment, and I'll be going to Kyiv on Wednesday, and then I'm going to Sumy on Monday. I'm going to be moving around quite a lot, but this is a permanent base that I have in Odessa. I love Odessa. I just think it's such a beautiful city, and it's quite a nice place to be able to go to also edit and to sort of recover after intense trips. If you go east, if you go south, if you go really far east and you go to Bucha, but if you go east and south, it can, it could be good to have somewhere as a base to recover after, and to put your thoughts together and to get things. Yeah, so and it's strange being here. There's not that many people here that speak English. I feel quite isolated here in some ways, but it's also a great place to be able to, without distraction, focus on these reports and focus on work. But I mean, I'm totally in love with this city. It's just it's beautiful. Every morning the sun rises. I can see it from the Black Sea all the way around to Arcadia, and it's just extremely inspiring. So I want to be here as a base at least maybe for a year, while I go around Ukraine. So we'll see what happens. But it's all going to be very responsive. I don't have much of an itinerary planned after next week. It's going to be, if something happens in the north, if something happens in the south, then I want to go there and report on what's going on. And I hope it works. I hope people see it in the way that people watch Nick's videos and see the reality of what's going on. Because the last time I was in Kherson, there were like 2 other journalists there, and they were putting drones into civilians nonstop. They were just hit a public bus with a drone. They were using drones to start wildfires, apparently, and there were 2 journalists there. And this is a situation that I would describe to people back in Britain on the phone, and people were shocked. They say they're putting drones, they're randomly dropping munitions onto civilians into the streets of a built-up city. And I say yes, and there's no other journalists here. You know, and this is in Europe. It's just staggering. So so this will be my base anyway, and we'll see what happens next. But you know, I try to work very, very quickly. It's very hard when you're on your own working in a lot of ways, because with the mainstream media, you know, 100% of your time is doing research, is looking into sources, is gathering information and pulling together a news report. That's it. And then you hand it off to your editor, and then they distribute it, they put it on television or they put it in newspapers. When you're an independent journalist, which most journalists are becoming now, you've got to spend 20% of your time doing fact-checking information, getting the story, and then you've got to edit the report, then you've got to color correct it, then you've got to distribute it and market it. It would be like being a journalist in Fleet Street back in the 80s who wrote for the Daily Express and finally submitting your story at 6 p.m. and then going down to the papers and then, you know, printing it in the papers, doing it yourself, getting a copy of it, and then trying to sell it in the street afterwards. So, you know, it's a lot of work. And I think that's also kind of the future of journalism in a lot of ways, is now going to be fractured as mainstream media gets smaller and smaller. So journalists have to spend much more time trying to put out their work and market their work rather than actually create news and find out what's going on. Yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting time.
Absolutely. I really hope that you gonna experience other cities as well, because there's just so many things to see in Ukraine. We have like mountains, we have deserts, we have everything. By the way, dear viewers, please subscribe to Caolan's YouTube. You can find it in the description, in the title to this video, because it's really worth it. This is one of the few journalists who literally reports from Ukraine, from the ground, and provides you with the insights from the war in Ukraine. I believe he does, like, of course, he does even more than I did back in my days, because I was attached to my brigade and I could basically only do so much because I was a press officer of my brigade. I couldn't just move around Ukraine because I was attached to one place and one commander. But Caolan provides a lot of footage, a lot of insights from the ground. Please make sure to subscribe to his channel. It's worth it. By the way, why Odessa? Do you prefer like Odessa vibes over Kyiv vibes? What's the reason?
I do. I find that in Kyiv, it's usually just filled with journalists who don't leave Kyiv, who like to blow smoke up, sorry, who like to just talk a lot, and who like to be in a club. And I want to be more solo. I also want to be closer to Kherson, because I want to do a lot of reporting there. I think it's underreported what's happening there. And I like the lack of distractions. You know, I find Kyiv very cliquey in a lot of ways. If you're an English-speaking journalist and you're there and you're operating like that, it can be a little bit difficult. Also, you know, there's something magical about Odessa. It feels like it's this mix of, it's almost like Troy mixed with the Mediterranean, mixed with Italy, mixed with France. You know, it's got this beautiful European feeling that is just really infectious, and I just feel at home here. So that's the main thing. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in Kyiv, and it's harder to get work done there. It's a, you know, a lot of socializing, a lot of talking, and the journalists are a little annoying there. So I prefer to be on my own.
I agree on that. Oh my God, I remember my birthday. When was that? 2020 or 2021? It's in summer. I went to Odessa for like a week, for like a whole week. to celebrate birthday, and I have a lot of friends there, a lot of mates from my university, and I was drunk every single day, even though like I don't drink in offline usually, but because I was in Odessa, I was drunk, I was wasted every single day. I only remember, waking up with a hangover and going to a sushi restaurant and then meeting my friend, and then that's it. I don't remember anything after that until the next day. It was so cool. It was like every single day. We went on a trip on a ship. We went past this this huge American transport ship that was docked there. It was impressive. I remember seeing those grain facilities on the docks that are being bombed right now. I believe there's like 2/3 of them are already damaged, unfortunately. And I remember it was such a cool place. I went on 2 tours around the city, and it was just so amazing. And the guy that went on a bus with us, he was like 70 plus, and he also had a birthday the same day. Oh man, what can I say?
It's amazing. I mean, I've not been doing that every night. I actually have, I can see the grain facilities from here in the port, and yes, they are being hit, which is extremely devastating because the Russians like to cause famine and poverty everywhere. They're trying to stop the ships coming in and out of here so that they don't just starve Asia and Africa of grain, but stop Ukraine's ability to even produce and sell food. You can see it happening here. And it's like the worst form of evil. This is like a medieval style warfare to produce famine in a country. And you can see it, I remember the other day when they hit that area down there, and then all the ships stopped. You can see all the ships coming in and out of the port. And it's just so depressing because when I was here last year, there were no ships coming in and out of Odessa. And it was really sad because Ukraine loves to produce things. It loves to make things. The culture of Ukraine is to create. Culture of Russia is to destroy. Culture of Ukraine is to create. And in this country, they create massive amounts of food to feed parts of the world. And it wasn't able to be shipped and sold from the port here. So it was amazing to see the ships come back and forth and to see things being shipped out and things made. And it was really depressing in the last few days seeing a lot of the ships stall because the port's being bombed, which is it's just so depressing. And then you have these conversations in America that say, well, should Ukraine be able to fight back and fire missiles back to where those munitions came from? I'm not sure about that. And the air defense system here isn't what it is in Kyiv because the West hasn't provided this country with the munitions they need and the permissions they need to use. And I can see it all happening from my window. It's again why I need to stay in Ukraine, because I can see it all the time. All of this is happening all the time here. And it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. I mean, the one thing that is just so incredible is watching the resilience of people in this country every single day. There was a massive strike here a few weeks ago, and I watched multiple things land all around the city, huge explosions, and people just turned their generators on and carried on living their lives and played and went to the beach instead. That wouldn't happen in Russia. The Russians who experienced bombings in the last few days in their munitions warehouses would have locked themselves inside and been terrified. But this is the difference. It's been quite nice watching the fireworks displays in Russia in the last few days, though. It's been kind of cathartic.
Oh my God.
They do put on good displays.
The recent one. Oh shit.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. I disappeared again. It was amazing, and their most recent firework when they wanted to test their nuclear missile, their Magic Orthodox Wunderwaffe that exploded in the silo, that was pretty impressive. I saw the most recent satellite imagery. Did you see that?
I thought that was great. I want to know who the person was in charge of stopping the missile exploding component who stole it, the corruption. I want to know which chain of events the corruption played part in that. But this is typical with Russia. It's like the reason that in Tiver it was meant to be the most fortified unit went up in flames and turned into a volcanic field is because of corruption. The reason that Kursk happened was because Putin gave tens of millions to fortify that border. And by the time that money got to the border, it was no more than probably a guy in a shovel digging half a trench, and then it's just all corruption. And it's the same with that missile strike. But this is what you get if you have a terrible culture that is a mafia state of corruption, then your missiles are going to explode in the ground.
Oh my God. Slavi says, I've only been drunk in Kharkiv. Slavi, you gotta go to Odessa, like literally. It's the best place to get wasted.
Yeah.
But one of the cringiest things, it's when they stationed their most combat-worthy unit, which is Kadyrovites, most combat-worthy according to their propagandas, of course, and they stationed them in Kursk in order to, welcome Ukrainian soldiers who literally passed by, and they never saw them. That is just so good. Did you hear something about that cyber truck that was blocked by Elon Musk for Kadyrov?
Yeah, well, Elon Musk is playing mind games with this country because that situation is the same situation we saw with the whole Starlink thing. Oh, I'm helping Ukraine. I'm giving them Starlink. I'm secretly blocking Starlink. Oh, no. I would never sell the Chechens a Cybertruck. Oh, I accidentally sold them a Cybertruck. Oh, I'm going to block it now. It's the same bullshit, because he thinks he can get away with this back and forth mind games thing. This is exactly the same thing as the Starlink Crimea stuff. I hope he's proud of himself. He saved the Black Sea Fleet from being destroyed. He sabotaged the Ukrainian technology after giving it to them and allowing them to use it. He can't make up his mind because he's a child. If you look at the video of him in Times Square, jumping up and down, looking like a giant baby, I mean, this is just ridiculous. My content cannot be contained for this person. But yeah, I mean, I hope they enjoy their Cybertrucks. I hope Tim Pool enjoys his Cybertruck if he spent all his money on that. I hope they all enjoy their Cybertrucks because this is just this is what the worst people right now seem to end up with a Cybertruck. This is an indication on what kind of person you are. They always say what kind of car you drive will determine what kind of person you are. If you drive a Porsche, you're an aggressive driver. If you have a BMW, you don't like parking in the right places. If you drive a Cybertruck, you're like a horrendous person. But yeah, it's just despicable. It's despicable, the mind games that he's playing. But again, people like Elon Musk don't realize that there is a war going on. They think that this is a joke. They think it's a game. They think it's a game that they can play like it's Minecraft, and they can mess around. They haven't been to this country before. They have no interest in actually visiting Ukraine and helping the Ukrainian people. Neither do any of these news outlets. I mean, this is what I talked about yesterday with the organizations that were indicted in the Tenant Media scandal. Rebel Media's name has come up a few times in the past. And, they sent a journalist to Moscow to interview people about the war in December 2022. They didn't send anyone to Kyiv in 2022 or at any point. So it's kind of the same with all of these groups and institutions. It's only gotten worse since Elon has taken over X, hence why anti-Ukraine propaganda has taken over the whole site. It's basically unusable at this point. Which is making me very glad that I've started a YouTube channel and not beholden to that dumpster fire of a website.
Yeah, I agree on that. It's really good decision to create a YouTube and report from Ukraine. It's my personal opinion, and I really hope that it will be successful. Again, dear viewers, please make sure to subscribe to Caolan's YouTube channel. It's in the description and everywhere. One thing I was criticized recently was when this information leaked that Musk's acquisition of Twitter was funded by a bunch of shady people. Like there's one rapper, I believe, that was convicted or charged like several times with all kinds of crazy shit. And then there was this company, HVC, that funds, by the way, some of the US Defense Department projects. And there's two sons of two sanctioned Russian oligarchs employed in this company. And we spoke about it in one of my videos, and people were like, but it doesn't prove anything. Like, they're just their sons, you know? Oh my God.
There's so much going on now that we won't know about until years have passed. I mean, this is the problem with a lot of this stuff, is it's always under wraps. There's so much dodgy stuff happening. I think whistleblowers will come out from X, from behind the scenes in a few years, but until then, we're not going to have any idea of what's going on there. But you know, Twitter is hemorrhaging money. You know, the advertising revenue is through the floor, and Musk is now taking shares from Tesla to pump it to try and prop up X. But, you know, Musk doesn't have to sell shares in Tesla to prop up X. All he has to do is make it usable and not have it a Russian propaganda website. At this point, they are the only social media site to not ban Russia Today, when Meta banned Russia Today last week, when Instagram and TikTok banned Russia Today this week. Why haven't X banned any of these sites? Because it's become a dumpster fire. That's actually all Elon has to do to save X and save the advertisers, is not allow the worst of humanity on that website. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You know, you don't have to host the most horrendous people on the planet on your website. Like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah,
Someone needs to
absolutely.
tell them that.
Funniest thing is that like free speech for everyone, but not ISIS for some reason, because they completely deserve having a free speech on X. Like, why not? You know, ISIS, aren't they humans or something? Khamenei has a Twitter account, even though Twitter is blocked in Iran. Medvedev has Twitter account, even though Twitter is blocked in Russia. This is so freaking crazy. God.
Yeah, and what was that account? There was an account a couple of years, well, when Elon took over, that was called like Elon's flight logs or something, and it was monitoring the private jets he was taking, or it was posting the flight logs of, you know, the celebrities that he was with, and they were banned immediately. So you can be a terrorist, absolutely fine. That's your free speech. Do whatever terrorism you like. Do whatever disinformation you like. You can criticize Elon Musk and be banned immediately. I mean, this is what we're facing here. You know, this is absolutely out of control. And advertisers are looking at this and thinking, why would we want to sell our body wash on a website filled with terrorists? You know, what is going on here? So,
yeah, and then he asks like, why nobody wants to like advertise. Holy shit, dude! Like, sometimes I'm not even sure like if he's like the genius businessman or he literally pays somebody to do it for him, because it's crazy. He doesn't look like Elon Musk that we used to know like 10 years ago, or maybe he changed. I have no idea what happened to him.
well,
How do you think?
not everyone is good at everything. You know, Elon Musk was very good at making car engines, and he was very good at, well, car batteries, and he was good at spaceships and tech. That's great. Just because you're good at building a car battery doesn't mean you know how to run a social media company. They are different skills. They're a different set of skills, shockingly. You know, not everyone can do every type of thing. You know, I'm quite good at making films and journalism. That doesn't mean I can go and run a spa, or, you know, go and start a business in something completely different. He should have stuck with what he was good at. And he was good at that. He was good at, you know, the clean energy stuff, at solar panels and power storage. But he decided to get into the business of public square and social media, and he's not good at that. That's all it is. Not everyone is good at everything all the time. And he should have just stayed with what he was. But he wants to take over the world. You know, he wants to be a hero. So good luck with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I have literally no idea. And the funniest thing is that he's actually like losing money every day because there's still so much funds that he has to return in the end. And his investors, well, they're happy because they receive like percentage, but he will have to return this stuff eventually. I have no idea. I asked Ali, one of my moderators, and she said that apparently he will just do OD and go bankrupt. Who knows? We will see. that looks very much like Elon Musk, actually. Oh my God! Tell me, where have you been to Ukraine, and what was your biggest impression? What is the most memorable thing that you have seen in Ukraine so far?
Well, it's difficult because the things that I find most memorable in this country are the things that aren't loud explosions or scenes of destruction. It's scenes of humanity. Again, it's the soldiers finding a bin to put the cigarette out despite having come from artillery fire. It was when we were filming evacuees from Bakhmut. And I remember it was a disused ambulance and it was racing down the road passing Chazov Yar that we jumped into. And it was filled with people holding their cats in cages. And this one woman was holding her cat, and she thought that going from Bakhmut to Kramatorsk was like me going halfway around the world. She'd never really left there before. And the person sitting next to her, I said, "How do you feel about the people that are doing this to you?" And he said, "I don't want to swear." I said, "No, it's okay, you can swear." And he said, "I wouldn't wish this on them or anyone. They probably have brothers or sisters too. And I just wouldn't wish this on anyone else. They can do whatever they want." And it was like moments filming and talking to people that had come from hell, actual hell in this country, and they still didn't have 1% of the hate that the Russians have for the people here, and they didn't want them to experience the same thing. That just stuck with me forever. I mean, I can never, it was the respect that people had for each other and for us as well. I remember we were at a petrol station somewhere in Konstantinivka, and the soldiers were all in there filling up gas and buying, hot dogs. And they saw that our shoes were covered in mud, and they realized that we were somewhere pretty dramatic, and they just stopped and smiled and shook our hand. And it was, there's just a level of humanity that exists here. It's the fact that people here in frontline cities where many have had to flee and leave pets just stay because they don't want, because they've rescued animals and they've rescued other people's pets and they don't want to leave them here roaming the streets. It's like, I spoke to Paul Conroy a lot about what war is and how there's civil war and there's different types of wars. And he summed it up really, really well for me. He said, "This is the first war I've ever been to that genuinely feels like it's a battle of good versus evil. Genuinely. Where there are people here that won't leave their home because they've got cats that they've rescued. And you've got people who will tie your hands behind your back and shoot you in the back of the head for looking at them in the wrong way under occupation." And it's the most clean-cut example of good versus evil that I think possibly exists. And it was the fact that the Ukrainians I spoke to under occupation didn't wish the same on the Russians. They were just glad that they were gone, and they started rebuilding their lives afterwards. There was a street cleaner in Kherson that I spoke to after shelling who put on a flak jacket and started cleaning up glass in the street minutes after attack with a flak jacket. And she said, "The reason we're going to win, the reason Kherson is going to win, is because we clean up. We keep things clean and we love our city and things are beautiful here." And it was like, it's just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And I don't think that would exist if Britain was under fire now. I don't think people would do that. I think Britain has lost the Blitz spirit. I think Britain has lost a lot of its self. I think a lot of our countries have lost a sense of their self. But Ukrainians still seem to have that. And again, I think it's happened far before the war. I think this has always been here. And it's just amazing. It's just amazing. I was here meeting locals in my house and the air raid siren went off and they just turned up the music because carrying on like normal is actually a fuck you to Russia and an act of resistance in a lot of ways, because Putin doesn't want people in this country to feel like they can have a normal life, to be happy, to live, to be Ukrainian. And so to still celebrate life is combating the war. And it's just it's everything like that tied together. That just
You
it
know,
blows my mind.
this is something that we learned from British people during the World War II. Yeah, actually.
Well, British people need to learn it from you again now.
When you live in peaceful country, in peaceful society, in democratic society, like not in some shitty, I don't know, Ussurisk, well, it's natural, I believe. And eventually we will, I believe that the decency in people will rise again, because currently we are viewed by more than 700 absolutely decent people from around the world, from UK, from the United States, from Canada, New Zealand, Romania, and any other countries. And, when I see all those people in the chat, this is my biggest motivation, and those people keep me running. Actually, they bring me hope, because one thing that we underestimated the West for is when the big invasion started, we all expected that nobody's gonna help us, like it already happened for how many years? 8 years. That was something that we thought, we were convinced, and I think Russians were convinced as well, that the West was not gonna react at all. And even though Ukraine still has a huge need for such things as proper air defense, proper long-range weapon to defend ourselves, enough tanks, enough airplanes, but still the support that we already feel, it's something that keeps us running. And people who write supportive comments in the chat, that is something that keeps us running. I remember back in the days, you say that you feel a bit isolated because in Odessa not many people speak English. That's something that I felt from 2022 to 2024, because I was isolated myself big time, because I have this huge, amazing community of people out there, but like in Ukraine, I cannot talk to them offline. And I would meet people here and there on the streets, people from like Australia, for example, or Canada. John Sweeney, by the way. Oh my God! I remember we had a drink during Mercado's birthday. And actually, I was lucky that I didn't drink alcohol that day, but I was already exhausted by Mercado barely.
Oh yes, no, I know exactly what that's like. I'm just quickly plugging this phone in. Yeah, well, I mean, I know exactly what that's like. Drinking with John is a drinking experience with a proper old school British journalist, which you don't see much of that anymore. It's like the old days of Fleet Street. It's a proper flashback.
It's like drinking with journalists is crazy. Drinking with British is like 2 times crazy, but drinking with British journalists is something insane. Oh my God! You reminded me one episode, by the way, regarding people who care about their home, because as soon as Hostomel got liberated, it was early April 2022, like the first days. And we moved back. I remember I was driving down the street in Hostomel, which was absolutely dangerous to drive, basically, because you could flatten your tires easily. Like everything was there were fragments just scattered around like trash, those burnt armored vehicles, burnt Russians on the street, and you could easily make several holes in your tires like that. I remember 2 days after that, the streets are clean, and I'm just driving down the street and I see a bunch of people wearing those orange vests, literally clearing everything. And after a while, you could not recognize the town. It was just so motivational to see people caring so much for their place. Oh, what
It's
one?
weird. It's weird. Like when I first saw that happen here, I thought it was some sort of government mandated thing. I thought it was like, okay, well, as soon as a missile attack happens or something happens, maybe Zelensky has said that, local authorities have to clean it up within an hour so that there's no evidence, and it's a morale thing. But when I saw people coming out of their houses with broomsticks and sweeping brushes and doing it themselves, I was like, no, this is just instinctively what feels right to do as Ukrainians is something bad has happened. Let's fix it. Let's make it better. Let's sort it out. Let's clean it up. It's just unbelievable. And we see this with the difference in trenches as well. I've been in, when I was in Chasiv Yar, the trenches were being dug. But when we went into one of the dugouts, there was an effort to make things feel like home, because that's what people here are fighting for, is home. And there was a kettle with a generator, and they offered me a cup of tea. They're under fire. There's dust falling from the ceiling when things land. And they still have a rug on the ground, and they still have decorations and make it feel like home. Because one side of this conflict is people fighting for home and a country and something beautiful. And one side has no idea what they're doing. They have no idea why they're even there. They were pulled out of mental asylums and thrown onto the front line. And their trenches are like dug with spoons, and they're basically just holes in the ground that look like something rats would live in. And it was like, I didn't know that that was the case until I physically saw it. And it's just like completely unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, that's the difference. I mean, it's like, it's the fact that I would go down to the beach here sometimes, and the toilet, to use a toilet on the beach, it costs like 10 hryvnia. In the UK, this is like a penny. And I would have, 50 hryvnia, and I would give it to the woman to be able to use the bathroom. And she would chase me down the seafront to try and give me the change if I walked out before she gave it to me, because people consistently try to do the right thing. And it's so ironic that Ukraine is a country that has had a successful campaign against it by Russian propagandists to say, oh, this is money laundering capital, this is all corruption. The corruption that's actually going on in the West is the fact that London is the Russian money laundering capital of the world, the filthy money laundering capital of the world, and the people here refuse to shortchange you, refuse to take a tip on the seafront. I mean, this is just everything was the opposite of what I expected when I came here. And it just, I think it also shows just how successful a lot of the propaganda has been against Ukraine, which again is why I want to do daily reports, which again is why it's important that there's more journalists here, because you don't have to do much other than show what's going on in this country to convince people. And I think when you talk earlier about, the fact that it's really inspiring as to see people from the West support Ukraine in a way that you didn't expect, I think that's because they can see it for what it is. When there are reports coming out about Ukraine, when there are YouTube videos coming out about Ukraine, people can see it. They can feel that this is a good country and people here are good. In their soul, people here are good. This is genuinely the right side of the war. And I think that's why so many people wanted to help, and I think it's why there's been so much support. But I guess I just hope in a lot of ways that good will always win over evil in the world. J.R.R. Tolkien talks about this, and in Lord of the Rings, there's films that talk about, good versus evil, and there's fairy tales talking about it. But I hope that's what happens here, that good will actually prevail, because you can see it and you can feel it, and I think everyone in the West can feel it, even if it's just from a distance.
Those who want to see, yeah. I remember this funny story when, and I'm sure that you will find it interesting as a British person, that Hostomel, like the very, very first morning when the attack happened, and I was there. I badly needed to smoke, because I didn't smoke actually, and we all started smoking on the very first day. And there were several guys from Gur, I believe, and I asked whether they have a cigarette, and they gave me like a whole pack, and I'm like, whoa, you guys want to have some tea? They're like, yeah, tea is good. And I went to my office. I had like this tiny press center in my brigade, and I made 2 cups of tea. And as soon as I made them, the helicopters arrived. and they started shooting at our positions at the Hostomel airfield, at my base and stuff, you know. And after like the first wave of those rockets ceased, I opened the doors, and I can see in the corridor, there was like tiny corridor, and two guardsmen from my brigade with the AKs, like, you know, looking very, I would not say scared, but rather like nervous, you know. What do I do as a press officer? As a press officer, I asked them, like, gentlemen, do you want to have some tea? Because I have like I have like 2 cups of tea here, and they looked at me like, you freaking insane or what?
My gosh.
It was kind of funny. And unfortunately, Buryats drank that tea, I believe, because they were sitting at our base for probably a month, and they completely destroyed like all the property. When I arrived there after a month, I saw like my teapot, the tea kettle, which was actually a really good electric tea kettle that they would put on freaking fire because they're freaking dumb. And I saw like my socks, you know, scattered around the office, and they also wrote, because apparently I think that they recognized me. That I was like in that office. There was like this calendar with me and Max, my buddy, and some other buddies. And on the wall, they left me a message informing that I was a faggot. And I was like, that is so Russian. I mean, that is just, oh my God. And well, they leave a lot of shit. Wherever they are. We went to our, I actually have it on my videos, we went to our barracks, and there's like, you know, bottles with urine, again, scattered around. They made like a wall from the metal lockers. On one side of this wall they would sleep, on the other side they would take a shit. And there was like all this garbage, all this chaos, and on the wall they left another message, like about all this, saying, "Faggots, learn how to fight." And we were like, we are so happy that we don't fight like you, motherfuckers.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine starting a war with a country a fraction of the size of you, losing it, and being humiliated to the point where your country has now been invaded for the first time since World War II. All your munitions warehouses are on fire. Your capital city's being hit by handmade drones, and you have the audacity to say, learn how to fight. I mean, these people are out of control. The kettle story is quite interesting. When I was in Kramatorsk, I think I set a very poor example of how smart British people might be, because you can't drink the tap water there, and I forgot about that. And curfew started, so I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning really thirsty, and I was like, oh my God, I really need some water. I'm going to boil some water, and then when it cools down I'll drink it, because I guess that'll make it safe. So I filled up the kettle, boiled it, put it in the freezer to make it cool down quicker, because I needed to drink it quickly. Forgot about it, checked out of the hotel. And you can imagine the next day the hotel people taking the kettle out of the freezer going, these British people have put the kettle in the freezer. They have no idea. Is this how they think that a kettle works? Is they put it in the freezer to freeze the water? I can't imagine what they would have thought. These British journalists coming here, putting kettles in the freezer. So, yeah, I wonder what impression that made. I'd like to find out one day.
Oh my God. They were like, that's the reason they quit EU, like 100%.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Why do you think Russians are so atrocious? What's the reason?
I think there is, I think the culture within Russia, and a culture is a product of a people. People are not a product of a culture. Culture comes after people. I think that for the last number of 100 years, the Russian culture and the Russian people have not advanced in the way that Ukrainians have. I mean, most of the space programs and the science programs and the advancements in the Soviet Union and in Russia were basically Ukrainians that were either taken or moved to develop it. This is why they tried to take cities rather than build their own up. Russia has plenty of cities, but they're not good enough because they're full of Russians. So they need proper cities that aren't full of Russians so that they can temporarily occupy them. And you know, this is what it's about. It's about taking things that better people have built, because you are incapable of building your own stuff and having your own culture. It's a mafia state. It's a rogue mafia state. It's like Somalia. It's like ISIS. We should look at it like that. ISIS were one of the first groups to target journalists and kill journalists. And it shocked the media world because for the first time ever in conflict, it went where no one else had gone before, and journalists started taking their press badges off because they would start beheading and killing journalists. Russia's been doing that now. Where I'm going next week, I've been told I can't wear the press stuff because it's like ISIS. This is a rogue terror state because the people in Russia who are complicit in this war, they're not protesting against this war. There are a huge number of people in Russia. There are 10 times more people in Russia than Ukraine. Ukraine protested in 2014 because they wanted to be more Western, they wanted to be part of the European Union, they wanted to be part of the West. There have been, and that's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the people. And in Russia, there's been absolutely no protests basically against the war because they're all complicit in this. There is a culture within the people in Russia, there is a culture of acceptance of mafia ideology, of corruption, of envy, and a lack of respect for other human beings and human life. I don't know where the original origins of that is, but that is what it is. And I know it's saying, oh, you know, you're stereotyping. You know, I know one Russian person that isn't like that. I don't care. This is what the Russian people are like. I can see it. This is they're not protesting this war. They're probably fairly happy with this war. If I could go to Russia and interview people in random towns and cities and ask them what they think of this war, they probably wouldn't care because they're indifferent about human life and they're indifferent about anything. And they're also people that value themselves more than anybody else. Russians think that they are the be all and end all, the most important people on the planet. And Ukrainians, they can be genocided. They don't really matter. You know, if you look at the propaganda that's going out on television in Russia, that is a representative of the people there. Media and government is a representative of the people of a country that is bottom up, not top down. And the television shows in Russia look like it looks like the wrong side of Star Wars. You know, it looks like the villains. You know, they're literally dressed in all black, standing in a circle with red lights everywhere. It literally looks, they look like the villains in a superhero movie. Like, this is who they are. This is what they watch. I don't know where it came from, but I'm describing what it is. So, and I don't care if I get criticism for that because this is what's going on. The Russians don't care about Ukrainians. They don't care about human life at all. And the only reason that I guess there hasn't been a huge amount of outrage is because the wealthy oligarchs of Moscow haven't had their children conscripted because Putin's too scared to do it, and they haven't returned in a casket yet. And all that matters in Russia is wealth. That's why if you look at an aerial image of Russia at night, it looks like pitch black except for this tiny dot of light in Moscow, because the ideology of Russians is you have the ruling power and everyone else around them are living in darkness and they're peasants because it's about subjugation. If you look at Finland at the border with Russia, it looks like North and South Korea at night. Pitch black versus light, light versus life. This is how it is. And as the Russians got closer to Ukraine, now we look at maps of Ukraine at night from aerial satellite videos, and it's plunged into darkness because of the power cuts here, because the Russians are at the gates. And where the Russians come, darkness comes, murder comes, torture comes, genocide comes, and everything becomes darker and uglier. I saw this the first time I went towards Bakhmut. There was a road to it from Konstantinivka, and there was literally, because the city was burning constantly, because the Russians were there destroying it, a layer of smog, and it was a beautiful day, and the sky was blue, and there was a line of darkness that we were driving into, and it looked like we were driving into Mordor. It got darker as we drove towards the Russians, because they bring darkness everywhere they come, everywhere they go. And this is why the analogies of orcs and Lord of the Rings is actually kind of slightly true, because that's actually the closest analogy we have to describing a lot of this. So that's my observation. I think it's correct. I'm sure some people will disagree with it and say that they know one or two Russians that are not as contemptible as that, but you know, they can have fun with that.
Yeah, I remember we were stationed in the area of Svetlodarsk, basically several kilometers away from Bakhmut, and we would go to Bakhmut often to pick mail for the soldiers, to get some kebab, you know, stuff like that. And Bakhmut was always, I think, one of the most beautiful places in Donbass, because Donbass generally looked interesting, because there's a lot of like towns where mining companies were, like miners lived and stuff. And Bakhmut was made beautiful on purpose, because again, not far from the front line before the 2022. So people coming from the occupied territories to Ukraine, they could see the difference, because there's so-called LPR, DPR, the thug states, so-called states, ruled by whoever, you know, without proper like medical service, without proper education, without proper anything. And here you can see beautiful shining Bakhmut with all kinds of stuff. All kinds of shops were open 24/7. You can, I would even order sushi to our position like in the night. Like I swear, I shit you not, not to the very position, but you know, where I could pick it. And it was just such a beautiful place. I seriously think that if I was gonna live somewhere in Donbass, I would probably pick Bakhmut. And look what they turned it into with their bombings. And they just don't care about lives, don't care about anything. But at the same time, it raises another question. For example, people on the West who support Russian terrorism, do they do that literally because of the brainwashing, because of this insane propaganda that we can see on a daily basis? Or is it because they envy them, or they project them on themselves? How do you think?
I think if anyone in the West that's been repeating Kremlin propaganda unknowingly or knowingly spent more than 10 minutes in this country, their mind would be changed instantly. So I think it's ignorance. I think that the Russian propaganda machine is so incredibly powerful. It's so well funded. It's so sleek that its success is measured on the fact of what people are saying about Ukraine. And I genuinely think it's a misinformed opinion. The people that I speak to in Britain who have been reading propaganda unintentionally and reading the wrong news sources are shocked when I tell them stories of things that I saw in this country. You know, I have right-wing friends who, you know, are of GB News and Talk TV and things like that. And I spoke to them after I got back to Britain, and they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, this is what's happening. This is what they're doing to children. This is the torture victim I spoke to. This is how beautiful it was. This is how, you know, these are the values of Ukraine. And they were genuinely shocked. I think it's ignorance, because the media in the West is failing. It's losing advertising revenue, and it's being bought and replaced by Russian propaganda. The Lebedevs bought the London Evening Standard. My friend who worked for the London Evening Standard, when Alexander Lebedev bought it, said that they would look into his office, he would be handed 10 to 15 stories every week about Russia, and he would look at these stories and go, yep, nope, we're not publishing that. Yep, we'll publish that. Nope, we won't publish that. This is Britain in 2000, in the modern age. So that's a huge part of it. And now people who don't read the mainstream media are going online and they're watching pundits paid by people like the Tenet media scandal, Margarita Simonyan's scheme, and they're looking at propaganda from people like Tim Pool saying that Ukraine is the enemy of the West. So people don't have time to figure out information for themselves. They've got jobs to do, they've got food to put on the table for their families, and you know, they've got 10 to 15 minutes a day to scroll their newsfeed and see what's going on in the world. And that newsfeed is filled with filthy Kremlin propaganda, and they don't know it. So it's not their fault. It's why when I meet someone in America, and I've just spent a few months in North America before I came here, and I met a load of people that were repeating to me Kremlin talking points. But I understood why they were saying those things, and I told them, I informed them that it's nonsense, and they changed their mind. But I wasn't angry at them because they are a victim of propaganda. They are on the receiving end of a very expensive operation. $10 million was sent to Lauren Shen to funnel to those 6 Tenet personalities. That $10 million is nothing compared to the actual amount that Russia is spending on destabilizing the West through the information warfare. It's nothing even close. They're happy to throw billions at this. This just happened to be one scheme. But don't take my word for either. I mean, Margarita Simonyan 2 weeks ago admit that they have an operation that basically says when the CIA or the British intelligence shut down one of our operations, she laughs because there's 600 more that they've already set up. And it's a cat and mouse chase that she's winning. So, again, this is why I still believe in hope and good, because the reality is that Ukraine is on the side of good, and the people here are good. And if enough good stories come out about it, and people see the truth about it, hopefully, a lot of this propaganda will fall apart at the seams down the line. But it's a cat and mouse chase. Look at the film festivals at the moment. It's not even our news feeds. It's not even our televisions. It's the film festivals we go to. It's documentaries that they are poisoning with Russia Today directors, putting movies out, humanizing soldiers at the other side of the front line who have come here for no reason other than to genocide Ukrainians. It is infecting every pore of our society. So, it's a huge battle, but the people that believe this propaganda, if you meet someone that believes this stuff, just explain to them the truth in a way that isn't hostile, because they're a victim to all of this. This is billions of dollars, it's sleek, and it's not something the average everyday American can compete with, right? They're just scrolling through their news feeds. It's unbelievably depressing. This is why I came after Nick in the way I did. This is why I was so angry at him, because he's contributing to that. A lot of people are contributing to that. And it's extremely damaging because, in the West, we have democracy, which means people vote, and people vote based on the information that they have about the world and about their politicians. And if that information comes from the Kremlin, they're going to vote for people that the Kremlin want in power and policies of those people. And it affects people's lives here directly. So this is an information war. The front line here is in the trenches, but Russia is at war in Ukraine. Here in the trenches, Russia is at war with Britain and America online. And it's the same kind of warfare. It's just not in the ground. It's in the cloud. But it's just as dangerous in a lot of ways because it's destabilizing the West.
I agree on that. Nick, in a way, is a big loser because Team Pool would receive like $100,000 per one video, like weekly, and this dude did like the same sort of disinformation for free. Oh my god!
Yeah.
However, I think he still has his chance because, like, come on, there's a lot of Russians from RT, I believe, already hunting this talented young man. But it's really, really important, I think, for governments who care, if they care, for the democracies in their countries to be preserved and defended, to help fight Russian propaganda, to help people that expose Russian disinformation, expose their fakes. There are several good examples. For example, in Poland, there's already a media was organized by the general staff of Poland that would expose cases of Russian disinformation in the country. They would also call Polish people also to participate to help fight Russian disinformation, which is absolutely proper thing to do. Baltic countries as well, they have TV shows that are dedicated to fighting disinformation. In Ukraine, of course, we have a lot of that. What do you think? How can we fight Russian disinformation on a larger scale, considering that they spent like $1.9 billion like in 2023 just for external propaganda, not even considering things like Team Pool and Tenet Media?
Well, the government of Britain and America needs to immediately realize the severity of the Russian threat, which is something they do too little too late. The United States only shut down Russia today during the full-scale invasion, which is too little too late. There has been decades of propaganda put out from Russia today across into American households, broadcasted for years before they shut it down. Too little, too late. They shut down Tenet a few weeks before the election. They knew this was going on for the last year. Too little, too late. They need to stop being too little, too late, realize that Russia's at war with them online and deal with it immediately. The might of the Pentagon and the might of the British intelligence system is huge. They can figure out anything they want to figure out, any transaction, any flow of money, any bot farm, they can figure out exactly what's going on, but they're not acting on it with the might and the severity that they need to. They could shut all of this down within weeks if they wanted to. It wouldn't cost that much money and it wouldn't cause that much disruption. In America, there's a fear of like protecting. It's holding up journalists as this sort of holy grail. You know, if we go after people like Lauren Shen, if we arrest anyone, it'll look like we're arresting journalists, and then they'll use it against us. Well, actually, they are not journalists. They're Russian propagandists who've taken millions of dollars. So you can put that aside and you can arrest them. They should start mass arresting people that have taken money from the Kremlin. They should start shutting down social media accounts that are repeating or profiting or putting out Kremlin lies. As if this is no different to the Cold War when the Russians were doing an information war against America. This is no different to World War II when the Nazis were putting out flyer campaigns and dumping them over London out of the planes. Britain responded to that with a very robust anti-propaganda campaign. That's exactly what Britain needs to do now. They need to put money back into it, and they need to put the resources of the Pentagon and the British intelligence services into it immediately. And it could be shut down within weeks. The accounts associated would be gone almost instantly. There would be lots of arrests. But, the West is always acting too late with Putin. This is why they allowed Putin to take Crimea in 2014. It's why Merkel met with Putin years after that and had a glass of champagne with him and opened the Nord Stream pipeline, because the West has been high off of the fumes of Russian gas money for so long, and cozy relationships to the Russians, like Boris Johnson was, that we're too scared to interfere with them. But we need to interfere with them because they're happy to interfere with us. They're poisoning people in Salisbury using chemical weapons. They're shooting down planes over Europe. They're interfering with our democracy. They're already at war with us. And we're not fighting back. We're not even letting Ukraine shoot weapons back into their country. So it's weakness, it's slowness. There is a war going on, and we need to start acting like it. It could be solved instantly. The Pentagon knows what's going on. There are reports into what's going on. They could shut this down quickly, but it's a reluctance. We don't want to upset the wrong people. We don't want to do anything before the election because Trump might use it as material. This is what it is. And it's so depressing because we can do it. We have all the resources we need to do it, but we just don't. And we can't leave it up to journalists to do it. We can't leave it up to people to make up their own minds. If you have $2 billion put into the Russian disinformation machine versus a mainstream media that is falling apart at the seams, that is having redundancies, that is losing money, then the Russian propaganda side is going to win. The government need to step in and not leave it to the media, and not even leave it to me to have to interview people like Nick and go after people like Tim Pool and things like that. And individual journalists. The government should be doing that, but they're not, because they're weak, and it will be the death of them. It will be the death of the West if they carry on like this.
I really, really wish more people from governments, not only in the UK, but also in Europe, in the United States and Canada, would hear you, seriously. And I believe that we all need more motivation and dedication, because Russians are very, very much dedicated to see our demise. But luckily, because people like you and because people like our viewers that are watching us right now, we have hope. And this is something really, really cool. Traditional question, because this is my channel, this is what we always do. What is your favorite food in Odessa?
Oh my gosh, what is my favorite food in Odessa? I'm very stereotypical. I always have chicken Kiev everywhere I go because I'm like a
Mm,
chav. So I just have like the standard, and I also like I'm going to the gym all the time, so I like to have just protein or whatever. But there's a restaurant at the end of my street that does the best chicken Kiev and borscht. So I usually have borscht to start and that to finish. But I'm actually not a huge fan of fish. And fish is the staple diet in Odessa, especially dried fish. Uh, so I'm not as adventurous with my food here as I am in, Kyiv or places like that. But yeah, there's a restaurant I go to every single day and I just love it. And it just, yeah, it does the best chicken Kyiv. And they don't deep fry it, they kind of have it breaded and then it's like, I don't know, whatever. It's very good.
yeah.
Although the Ukrainians use dill on everything, and this is the one thing I actually really don't like dill. And I don't know whether it's because I think the first time I had dill was in Kramatorsk, and I was so scared every time I was there. Like every night I could barely eat, but everything was covered in dill. And I think it's, yeah, the first time I'd had it, because in Britain you've got thyme and rosemary are like the staple herbs. And I think I associated the like few days of being terrified there with just constantly eating dill, and now I just can't have it anymore. So I always have to order everything without dill, which is kind of weird. But in Ukraine, they find marvelous ways to put dill in places that you would never expect it in, in ice cream and fajitas, just like in everything. Like they've managed to sneak it into everything, and I don't quite know how they've done it.
Sometimes it's kind of proper. For example, when you eat like pelmeni, like dumplings or boiled potato, like it's fine. But then when they just stuff everything, yeah, I completely agree on that. I'm not a big fan of deal myself. But one thing about Odessa though is that generally you can find general Ukrainian cuisine, which is like borscht, vareniki, whatever, anywhere you go in any city. But Odessa has its own cuisine because they have a lot of dishes prepared out of fish and stuff. They have this forschmack. If you find forschmack, you gotta love it. In Odessa, it's a very, very much local stuff.
It's
And
like a pate type thing, isn't it? It can be meat or fish, like it's like a compressed. Yeah, I've had it before. It's really good. The place down there. So the place I go to is Crimean. It's like a Crimean restaurant, Crimean Ukrainian, same thing, and they have that, and it's extremely good.
yeah, yeah. Let's check out some questions from the viewers. Is there a link to the video in question? Nelson, you can find Caolan's YouTube. And on his YouTube, I believe one of the recent videos is literally, it's very, very easy to find. Robert asks, does anyone think Tim Pool didn't know he was taking Russian money? How do you think? Did he know?
Yeah, definitely. Tim Pool definitely knew that he was taking Russian money. I know one of the producers that worked with people at Tenet who told me that they were all worried that it was Russia. One of them apparently accidentally got paid in rubles, which is not really something that should happen by accident because rubles is one of the hardest currencies to trade in nowadays, so you don't accidentally get paid in rubles. Also, Tim Pool has nothing to add to any conversation. This is a person who's never left the basement in which they pontificate their garbage from. And if he thought that his show was worth $100,000 an episode, when he talks about things like Ukraine having never set foot in a war zone, never mind left where he is, then he's either completely stupid, at which point you shouldn't be listening to him, or he knew it was Russian money. There are a tiny number of Americans that actually fund the type of content that Tim Pool makes, and they all know who they are. These are a handful of people. They weren't the Christian fundamentalists. They weren't the people who were around Alex Jones. They weren't the angel investors of Rebel. They were the Russians. They knew about the Russians. Of course they did. This is why Tim Pool has been so quiet recently. This is why all of them have been so quiet recently. Lauren Southern hasn't tweeted since the scandal because they're guilty. They took Russian money and they kept it and they bought, I don't know, Cybertrucks with it. I don't know what they did. But they should either, if I was those people, I would be donating that money to Ukraine or I would be never making content ever again. Absolutely, he knew what he was doing. Of course he did. These people are
Uh,
meant to be journalists. They didn't ask the question. These people say that the mainstream media is biased because it doesn't dig into the real reality of what's going on. The mainstream media didn't look into the cats and dogs being eaten by Haitians. You didn't ask who was giving you $100,000 an episode, and you think the mainstream media aren't asking the tough questions? Give me a break.
This is so cool when they say, like they are independent media, and they were like literally taking money from Russians, and Russians were pushed all kinds of crap like directly into American brains through them. This is just I don't know, I cannot call it best practice, but in terms of Russian propaganda, it's 100% best practice. Jimmy Hagan asks, ask Caolan the story behind this cartridge around his neck, or perhaps it's not a cartridge.
Oh, no, this is a necklace that I bought that has rusted because I have kept it on while swimming in the Black Sea every day.
Ah.
So it's gone orange, but it was a lovely silver. There's no meaning behind it, unfortunately.
How's the water in Odessa, by the way, these days?
It's really warm. I mean, the Black Sea is lovely. It's very, very calm. I think there are sea mines, there's signs for sea mines, but I'm actually more frightened of the jellyfish, which have decided to take over the sea recently, and they're huge. So that's kind of a bit of a concern, but it's nice. And it's nice. I mean, all the locals go down there at around 5 or 6 p.m. and the whole ocean front is just filled with people swimming. There's such a beautiful coastline here. But
Oh,
it's
yeah.
nice. It's really, really good. I mean, today was 26 degrees Celsius. Like it's warm. It still feels like summer. It's wild.
Oh my God, I miss it so much. Question, why is Tim Pool still on YouTube? Actually, YouTube channel of Tim Pool and the commentators from Tenet Media, they were removed, as well as Tenet Media itself. No?
They weren't,
Wasn't it?
unfortunately. Again, weak governments that decide to do too little too late. Literally, Tim Pool would have to actually move to Moscow and get a show on Slovenyov's program before he gets banned from YouTube. I mean, it has to be that obvious. Tim Pool is still there, all good. 2 million subscribers, that's great. They're all still there. The Tenet Media account has been taken down.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But they're all still there. Lauren Southern's still there. Yeah, Lauren Chen and Tenet were taken down. Everyone else is still there, which is great for them. So they can continue to pollute the world with their propaganda. Very nice. Nice of YouTube to give them the platform to do that.
That's a disgrace. I know that like a channel of some of their commentators were removed. Not sure if they were talking
One of
about
them
people,
was it Tyler Hansen? It was one of them. One of them had his account removed, but then YouTube reinstated it and said it was a mistake. The only people that have had it removed was Lauren Shen, who took the Kremlin cash, and Tenet Media that hosted those people. All 6 commentators still have their YouTube accounts monetized as well, so that's good for them. They can make some money on the side, because then you can make money from Russian propaganda, and you get YouTube ad revenue, so it's like double paycheck.
That's a success story. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, Dachi says, brother, make sure this young Brit stays alive. I like this one. So we already have people praying for you and wishing you all the best. I wonder if Starsky can still walk when he's wasted. I kinda can, but very slow. Mad says, it's after your story with the tea kettle. I think they revoke your British passport if you don't know how to use a kettle.
Yeah, I'm still wondering what she thought. Didn't the British, aren't they known for tea? And they're freezing the water and putting the kettle in the freezer when it's supposed to boil. I mean, what do they do? I mean, I just imagining what was going on in her mind after that. And aren't they supposed to be journalists, like investigative journalists, and they don't know how to use a kettle? I mean, I need to find that woman one day and explain myself.
Oh my God, this is crazy. Russian propaganda is okay on YouTube. Just don't play a Beatles song in the background of your toast.
No, but that's actually really great, because YouTube have released statements saying it's really hard for us to identify Russian propaganda, and it's really hard for us to know which accounts are doing it or not. And I feel so sorry for them, because when there's money involved, like record companies saying you can't put our copyright content, they have the best technology on the face of the earth to identify this. They've got AI, they've got voice recognition. Within 2 seconds of uploading a Beatles song, the FBI are hammering through your front door. The YouTube video's gone, your account's nuked. But you know, you upload Kremlin stuff, and they're like, "Oh, you know, we're in the dark ages here at YouTube. We don't know how to use technology. You know, God knows how we would identify any of that. You know, because they don't. There's no money incentive to taking down Russian propaganda, so they're not going to do it."
Apparently nobody finances this. That's why it makes no sense. Like when I talk to the editor for TV Rain, you know, Russian oppositionist channels like TV Rain, etc.
Yeah.
Like I literally asked why you don't do content in English language. Well, basically that was the answer, you know, like meh. US has freedom of speech and freedom of press. How can government censor propaganda? It's impossible. I agree
Well,
on that.
if you put out defamation, then you go to court, you go to prison, you get sued. So why not have legal repercussions if you put out Kremlin propaganda? It's easy. The legal system just needs to be changed to deal with it. This isn't going to be shutting down. You know, if someone like Nick comes here and I think it was unintentionally putting out Kremlin propaganda, he just wanted to grift. You know, I don't think he should be thrown in prison. I think he should be exposed. But there are people who are taking money from the Kremlin who should be thrown in prison for it, for treason. And that's easily done, absolutely easily done. Or you could have accounts suspended. You could have people that put out Kremlin propaganda all the time. You could just have their accounts demonetized so that they're not amplified at the shop front of YouTube. There's loads of ways you can deal with this that don't interfere with free speech whatsoever. You know, you could even have it so that if people really want to put out some Kremlin propaganda, they can, but it's not going to be amplified into the news feeds of people that aren't looking for it. Like, you know, there are so many systems that can be created that can deal with this, that could be implemented within weeks. I mean, really, it's not a threat to press freedom at all. The threat to press freedom is the Russians buying the press, which is what they're doing, and putting out fake news. That's the threat to press freedom.
I agree. And generally, blocking Russian channels of delivering disinformation to the viewers, to the audience, is something really, really effective. It's as effective as exposing fakes. And generally, it takes less time, and it's much more, I would say, it hurts Russian propagandists very, very much, unlike exposing. However, exposing Russian propaganda is also very much effective. Like, I think it's probably the most worth way of fighting. How do you think?
I think exposing it is well, it's pretty effective. You know, this is why I found Nick's Fixers and spoke to them about that, because people can see what's happening and it can be a record. Shutting it down at source works very well because literally the information can't spread. But I think you know, people like a good expose. People like seeing the lid lifted on the darkness in our society sometimes, and I think, you know, I think that works very well too. But again, it shouldn't be left to solely journalists to deal with the Kremlin propaganda machine. It's a $2 billion machine, and our media is crumbling, and it's less and less funded every day. It shouldn't be left to journalists to tackle this. They have enough to do, documenting things like what's happening here. So I think that's where government needs to step in. You know, we don't have, you know, in Russia, the media is the government. It's owned by the government. It's like a military wing of the government in a lot of ways. In Europe, it's not. And it shouldn't be left to journalists to basically fight that war.
Yeah. Can you please explain to our viewers what's the difference between biased Western media and Russian propaganda?
Well, Russian propaganda is proven to be is information that is produced from the government of Russia. Russia controls the information that comes out, and it gets pumped into the television screens of Russia, and that is basically clean cut. It's coming from Putin. One person decides what the television presenters are allowed to say. This country in Russia, this is a country that jails journalists en masse for criticizing the government in any capacity. and has been rated one of the lowest on earth for press freedom. And then you look at the West, which can criticize the government whenever it likes. That is pretty open and free. The majority of press don't take money from the government. Obviously, the BBC has its license fee, but the majority of the US media doesn't take money from the government. They're allowed to criticize the government. They criticized Trump endlessly when he was in power. They criticized Biden a lot when he was in power. If you did that in Russia, you'd be thrown in prison immediately against Putin. There's a huge difference with the media ecosystem in the West compared to Russia. That doesn't mean it doesn't have its problems. The mainstream media during the Iraq War, the New York Times, put out disinformation saying that there were weapons of mass destruction, and they repeated government lies. That's a fault of the media. The media have also taken money from oil and gas companies and not criticized those companies adequately in the past. That's a fault of the media, but it is nothing compared to Russia and that as a propaganda machine. A media that has its faults is not comparable to a media that is government controlled, dictator controlled, fascist controlled. And it's not comparable. I know I meet these people all the time in Britain that have these false equivalencies. They say, oh, we watch Al Jazeera, for balance. We watch Russian TV for balance. Okay, well, watching free press that's produced in Britain versus state-controlled Kremlin propaganda is not balance. It's not the other side of the story. It's a false equivalence, and it's an attempt to be edgy. The closest thing that the world has to free information and free press is the system that we have in Britain and America and in the West as a press. That is the closest thing we have to it. We should protect it and not crap on it all the time, and try and build it up rather than watch the other side every now and then for balance. We should be trying to make it better. We should be funding it more. So it's a false equivalence.
I just so much agree with you. I had an opportunity to observe, because I worked at the television myself back in the days, and I had opportunity to compare when Ukrainian media were independent in the beginning, like 90s. Then they were dependent, basically like Tenet media later. Then when pro-Russian government was in charge, they all became like completely state-controlled. Then after the Revolution of Dignity, and I would not even say Revolution of Dignity, Orange Revolution, when we had Orange Revolution, that's when the media finally started doing their job. They became less biased, and Revolution of Dignity, we saw all sorts of channels showing, like, reporting from the ground, where you like cannot make up things, and they were showing the truth. And this evolution of media in Ukraine, to me, it's really, really exciting to see. But generally, Western media were always our standard that we were trying to reach as much as possible. What is your opinion on Russian opposition?
Well, it doesn't exist. The Russian opposition is, I guess, the West and Ukraine opposing Russia. I mean, there isn't really any real Russian opposition. Navalny wasn't very fond of Ukraine and probably would have supported the war in a lot of ways. I mean, there isn't Russian opposition either. If you oppose the regime in Russia and you're the tiny number of people that can be bothered to do that, then you're thrown in prison. Doesn't exist. There just isn't really. I mean, the people in Russia are pretty happy with this war. People in Russia don't really care about much other than themselves and Russia, and they're pretty supportive of Putin in a lot of ways. There isn't much opposition, unless the lives of Russians are actually affected deeply by this war, which hasn't happened quite yet. They can't travel to Europe as easily. I would say they can't shop at Hugo Boss anymore, but now they can. Their lives haven't been made that difficult by this, and there won't be any opposition until it affects them personally. So there isn't any.
I agree on that. When Russians brag about like their supermarkets, like you can find anything here, it's because you're idiot. It's because parts for producing missiles are sanctioned. That's because oil and gas are sanctioned. That's because like electronics and all sorts of stuff you use for building drones and missiles are sanctioned. Not your freaking sausages or she or I don't know. 100%. We have a question from Arthur who asks, where in Scotland were you born? Glasgow born here, Glasgow born and bred here.
I'm from Glasgow. I'm from a place called Motherwell in Glasgow, which is pretty sketchy. It's the sketchy side of town, east of Glasgow. But yeah, that's where I was born.
What is the coolest local food in Glasgow?
For me here
In Glasgow.
in Glasgow, the coolest local food. Oh God, this is going to upset Scottish people because they hate it. Is you can get a deep fried Mars bar in takeaways at 2 a.m. in Glasgow, where they freeze the Mars bar, they fill it with batter, and they fry it, and it's so good. It is probably the reason that the life expectancy in Scotland is one of the lowest in Europe, but it's delicious.
I gotta try that. Oh my God. Okay. What kind of beer do people prefer there? Do they generally like darker beer or like light beer?
In Glasgow?
Yeah.
Well, I left when I was very young, too young to drink alcohol. But the drink that Glasgow is famous for is Buckfast, which is a tonic wine, which is what you drink out of the bottle in the street. When your life is falling apart. It's basically a very strong wine that is absolutely horrendous. And that's also something that kind of Glasgow is famous for. I'm allowed to say this because I'm from there, but it's, it's not all the best stuff. Although I grew up in a lot of ways in Southern Ireland, and that was Guinness was my favorite drink there. There's an Irish pub in Odessa that has really good Guinness, so I usually have that beer when I go abroad.
Oh my God. I remember back in the days, it was like 2010 or 2011 when Ukraine already evolved from being, like country of gopniks to like a bit better version. But still, some of my friends sent me this comparison. Like on the left, you can see like pictures from glamorous nightclub in Sweden, and on the right you can see pictures from like some sketchy pub in the UK, and on the left you can see like beautiful people dancing, and there's like lights and everything, and everything looks as glamorous as you can imagine. On the pictures from like sketchy pub, you can imagine what's there, and people like somebody like punches some other dude, like they drink beer and stuff, and I'm like, holy shit, like I'm home. If I was there, that's like in Berdichev, like several kilometers away from it. It's like the same stuff. We actually have a lot of in common in everybody, with Swedes, with British people. I can tell, because again, in Ukraine, you can find all kinds of places. If you want to lose your iPhone and several teeth, you can go to like a sketchy pub in Berdichev. If you want some glamorous club, you can go to, I don't know, like Kyiv downtown and find all kinds of entertainment. That's what makes Ukraine so cool, because it's every city doesn't look like any other city in Ukraine, and everywhere you can find something new and unique.
Oh, I couldn't believe it. I was describing this when I came back to the UK, and they were like, what was Ukraine like? What was Ukraine like? And I think they just, people in Britain just think it's like this just sort of plain with cities where bombing happens and everything. It looks very old and Soviet. I would show them pictures on my phone, and you have like, I was like, you basically have, it's like a video game where you can go to like with all the different continents, like in Grand Theft Auto. It's like you have the mountains in the west, you've got the Black Sea, which is like, with places that look like the Amalfi Coast in the south. You've got Kyiv, which is like as cosmopolitan as you can imagine, like an American city. You've got like the in the east, it's cold and it's flat, and then you've got the sort of ridges and the salt mine. Like it's literally got every type of landscape that you can imagine, and then every city has its own culture. And then I describe Odessa, and it's like, oh, it's like the Mediterranean mixed with old Ukraine, mixed with Crimea, mixed with Georgia, mixed with France, and then the architecture is inspired by Italian architect. And it's like it's literally got everything in one country. Americans used to describe their country as, people used to say, well, in America, we don't, the reason that a lot of Americans don't have American passports is because a lot of them say, well, we don't need to leave America. We've got everything here. We've got the West Coast, the East Coast, we've got the mountains, we've got the sea, we've got the beach, we've got everything. And Ukraine's kind of the closest thing to that in Europe. It literally is, you could never leave Ukraine and you could feel like you've almost traveled the world in a lot of ways because it's just so vivid. Oh gosh, it's amazing.
Absolutely. I remember when we were training at one of the biggest training grounds, military training grounds in Ukraine, not far from Kyiv. Like from the very first day I joined my brigade in 2016. And that very place, even though it's like, I don't know, 70 kilometers away from Kyiv, it has all kinds of terrain, all kinds of stuff you can find there. You want swamps, there's swamps. You want to try to cross rivers, for example, with your recon guys, you can do that. Sandy, like a desert, like a true desert, like the sand everywhere with pine trees like growing out of the sand. It's crazy. And like my coolest memories are deeply tied with this place. It's like huge territory. Also, it's not far from country houses that belong to Ukrainian celebrities. We had a lot of like singers and actors. In order to get to their country house, they had to go through the military base, actually, which is kind of crazy, but still, like, and they would like sometimes we would return from like a shooting range, and there's like this enormous car with I don't know, like what her name was. Anyways, Olga. I forgot Ukrainian singers. She wasn't that good, anyways. Whatever. So, guys. We crossed 2-hour mark here on our stream. I think it's yeah, time flies, bro. And you haven't been yet to my Friday night chill because we talk about all sorts of stuff, food mostly. Friends, this is a good opportunity to say thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Please make sure to subscribe to Caolan's channel. It's absolutely worth it if you want to follow updates from Ukraine from the ground. Please follow Caolan's YouTube channel, and don't forget to watch that that absolutely amazing video of him destroying the grifter from the US, Nick Shirley. Again, it's absolutely worth it. Caolan, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It was a pleasure, a lot of insights, and I really hope that we will see you later as well. And is there anything you would like to say to our audience?
Just thank you for having me and like being online the whole time, and just some of your comments were extremely nice that you read out. So yeah, thank you for tuning in, I guess.
Thank you so much. My dear friends, thank you for supporting Ukraine. Thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you for supporting Caolan and subscribing to him. Big thanks to all of amazing people who write their commentaries, asking questions. You are really amazing. I had different audiences when you invite some guests to your, I don't know, like a platoon, and then you ask for questions and everybody goes like, I'm really happy you're not like that. And guys, thanks to all the members who keep this channel running. You are amazing. All the supporters of Ukraine, this is a proper thing to do to support our country that is fighting Russian aggression. We'll see you next time, and be safe.